Hi, this is Professor Evans with feedback on your SA2, the rhetorical analysis. So whenever we start this, we generally go to the criteria for excellence. So here we're looking for an effective introduction, clear thesis, a clear structure to how you're laying out your argument, specific examples to support assertions you're making, a fairly narrow scope in terms of what you're looking at in rhetoric elements, and not getting trapped into what the person is arguing, rather what you're arguing, which is rhetorical effectiveness as well. I'm seeing a lot of that in this paper. I think you're kind of working through logos in these two sections here, and then kind of moving into pathos is smart. I think those are kind of like two of the biggest points within the paper as well. So I think you do a good job of that. I think the one area that I do think that we still need to think about is your introduction. This deals, so the prompt asks you to do a couple of things. One of them is kind of have an introduction that would capture a reader's attention, would effectively convey, what a context as well. But the other thing is, which is kind of embedded into the prompt, is this idea that you would give a summary. So in the same way they would say with like SA1, where we're like, oh yeah, well, what does the object look like? You would need to give a brief summary, and that's a fairly standard element of a rhetorical analysis, because you can't always assume that the reader knows exactly what you're talking about. So I think what you're doing here in your introduction is you're kind of combining these two elements. You're kind of like summarizing Harris's point, but also trying to put a reader into a context. My advice would be to separate these out. Kind of start with the idea of what you're arguing about, rhetorical effectiveness of the article, and then move into Harris as an example. So you could end up saying is that we talked about in class the idea that logos is kind of the dominant force within kind of the rhetoric triangle in Western culture. So maybe you'd end up saying is, but the fact that you're pinpointing both logos and pathos might be the place to start. So you end up saying is like, oh, you've got these two elements, and in combination you can effectively build an argument logically, but then appeal to the reader's emotion in an effective process. So man, that's the big picture. Then you say, a good example of this would be Sam Harris's article in defense of torture, and that then you would end up providing your thesis. And then maybe you would have another paragraph here that would kind of summarize what he was doing. And then you kind of go up and say, okay, so his appeal to logos works here. The section that I think is the least effective is this idea of the confidence in his argument. I think he is confident in what he's saying, but I think he's also kind of in the section you're talking about here, he literally is saying, I will now present an argument for the use of torture in rare circumstances. Rare circumstance. Interesting as well. So he's not advocating, even words like that right there are indicating that. He's not saying, man, we ought to do it all the time. We're saying that this is a pretty limited thing. So I'm already in qualifying my argument that this is a fairly limited thing. While many people have objected on emotional grounds, my defense of torture, no one has pointed out flaws in my argument as well. So that then he's already playing with that same thing that you're talking about of emotion and logic here as well. So that people get, they're upset because it's a defensive, it's an emotional subject, but nobody can point holes in my argument. Nobody can point holes in my argument. So here he's also kind of talking about his ethos, his credibility. And then here's the clincher for that. I hope my case for torture is wrong. I'd rather be wrong. I hope I am wrong. Because as I would much rather be on the side of the good people. And he's kind of then making a nod to the people of the audience who feel this way. I don't want to be a monster, but I think this is our only route. So again, this kind of logos and logic kind of working together as well. So you may want to think about this section here. But overall, as I said, I think a very effective essay. All right, I hope this was helpful.